Ujishuaslan. Good morning. My name is Daniel Harrison. I'm from Chickaloon Village. I am Caribou Clan and a Nupiaq Eskimo. I do song and dance at our Indian school, Yanida'a. So I'm going to open the meeting up with our salmon song. We call it Suka. And it talks about salmon. Please come inside the fish trap. Thank you. We are hungry.
Computer. Okay, now I see it. English.
Suka ani si tekye ani uyak es ani Suka kurila chin and sadi chin Suka ani si tekye ani uyak es ani Sluk kurila, chin and sadi chin. Sluk ani si tekye ani, uyak tes ani. Sluk kurila, chin and sadi chin. Sluk ani si tekye ani uyak tes ani Sluk kurila chin and sadi chin
Chinan, Welly. Nah.
Ahom. Thank you, Daniel, for that beautiful song and opening us up in this good way. Once again, welcome to we really appreciate the song and you taking the time to share with us this morning. For those who are just tuning in, welcome once again. Si Maburika. Welcome to everyone to this 8th session of this IITC webinar series. We're going to be talking about restoring traditional fisheries today. So our first speaker will be doing an introduction, and we are right now welcoming Mr. Saúl Vicente Vásquez. He's Zapoteca. He's the IITC Food Sovereignty Program Coordinator. He's calling in from Oaxaca, Mexico. Saúl, when you are ready, please unmute yourself. You have the floor.
Adiós y bicheca, bizanaca. Vedete schise, grazie se tu caiui a tu lado, nel cadia a tu lado. Ci qui notizia di nagiri. Tu schise per la turizia bizanaca.
Saúl speaking Zapotec language. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, my brothers and sisters from wherever you are watching and listening to this webinar. I've greeted you in my indigenous language. Good morning. My name is Saúl Vicente Vásquez. I'm Zapotec from Oaxaca, Mexico. And I greet you with much respect, and I thank IITC for organizing this webinar to reflect on a very important topic that is rarely addressed in our work. That is the topic of indigenous peoples who work in small-scale fishing or traditional fishing. It's a topic that really draws my attention because I come from a family of fisher folk. My father fished and my mother prepared and sold fish and other products of the sea in the market. And in that sense, our food base was basically fish. And it gave us a great nutritional base. There's a study conducted by the National Institute of Nutrition of Mexico, which found that the children of my community who lived from fishing were the ones with the highest level of nutrition. That is the truth of the contribution that fishing provides for the nutrition of our people. We, the indigenous peoples, are the heirs and guardians of this rich cultural and natural heritage, despite having suffered from colonial times until today, the dispossession of our ancestral lands and territories and the denial of our ethnic, linguistic, and cultural identity. In the face of these destructive processes, the vitality of indigenous peoples continues to be demonstrated not only in having survived this suffering that we were subjected to, but also in watching over and caring for this heritage, and especially in our traditional knowledge, and especially in recent decades, demanding recognition and protection of our rights and our heritage, our patrimony, and our knowledge. As part of the process of world integration and globalization, we face greater challenges as indigenous people. And it is increasingly recognized that this natural, cultural, social, and moral heritage presents not only the key to recovering and improving the living standards of indigenous peoples, but also an opportunity to enrich through intercultural processes the articulation of local societies and economies with increasingly democratic society and increasingly globalized economy in Latin America and the world. In this context, indigenous peoples have led a long struggle for recognition of our rights, now established in the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People. One of those rights is our right to maintain our subsistence, as established in Article 20, which states indigenous peoples have the right to maintain and develop their political, economic, and social systems or institutions, to enjoy secure enjoyment of their means of subsistence and development, and engage freely in all their traditional and other economic activities. That's the first paragraph. I will now read the second paragraph. One of these components is the human right to food, food sovereignty. And from there, IITC has made an effort to organize and struggle with other small-scale food producing peoples and social movements to promote recognition of this right on an international scale. In particular, with small-scale fisher folk through a global platform called the International Planning Committee for Food Sovereignty. Through that, we work with the working group on fisheries. So through our work and our advocacy done within the FAO and the COFI, which is the working group on fisheries, guidelines were approved for achieving sustainability for small-scale fisheries in the context of global food security and poverty eradication based on human rights and a holistic approach. Now we are working to participate in 2022, which will be the UN International Year of Artisanal Fisheries and Aquaculture, to highlight the fundamental role of small-scale fisheries in the context of global sovereignty and to contribute to achieving the SDG number 2 and number 14, especially the Sustainable Development Goals 2 and 14. We've worked to promote a questionnaire on the Code of Conduct for Responsible Fishing, which as IITC, we can support this so that our organizations and people can participate in order to consider the vision of indigenous peoples engaged in small-scale or artisanal fishing. And as indicated by the UN Declaration, by working on our own questionnaire. That is why we, on this occasion, have these extraordinary brothers and sisters who will share with us their experiences and work they've been doing with their indigenous communities for the protection and restoration of our fisheries based on their ancestral knowledge and practices, as they offer solutions to the fundamental contradictions facing the world In the face of crisis we are experiencing, particularly the food crisis, and this is what our brothers and sisters contribute to humanity with 25% of the food proteins that humanity receives through our fisheries. Thank you very much, and I look forward to the presentations.
Home, thank you, Saúl, for that important introduction, really putting things in context, not only at the local level, sharing that information about children in your community who are engaged and who interact with traditional fishing, but also highlighting um, the international effects of this whole issue. We appreciate you talking about the upcoming meetings that would probably be of interest to many of our listeners and our speakers, particularly highlighting what's going to happen in 2022, which is that I think you mentioned the international year or the focus on artisanal fisheries, very important, and also that the idea of food sovereignty is a human right. So I really appreciate everything that you shared, and say once again thank you. Right now, I'm going to introduce our next speaker, John Cyrus. He's from Colville. He's Colville and Wenacchi. He's the committee coordinator for the Upper Columbia United Tribes, and he's calling in from Washington. John, thank you very much for being here. You have the floor. Just unmute yourself, and you have the floor. Thank you.
All right, Lynn, thank you, Roberto. Thank you, Saul. I'm going to get my PowerPoints up here, and I'll get going. And I should introduce myself in my language in Chasqui Sai in Chakin Sukanakenach and Pasquas Nach Methal. My native name is Sai. I'm Okanagan, Wenatchee, and Methal, and that's part of the Confederated Tribes of the Colville Reservation. My presentation that I'm going to give today is really around my view, and I'm only speaking for myself. I don't speak for the 5 tribes that are within our confederation, but I'm going to talk a little bit about what we've done so far in trying to protect and restore our fisheries. And Saúl has made some just amazing points that I really appreciate in that introduction. So thank you for that. For us, our fishery is along the Columbia River. We call it Petak, the big river. And this river provided everything for us. It provided our food, our sustenance, medicines. So, it's really important to acknowledge, where we're at. We're in the Pacific Northwest. I'm from the Colville Indian Reservation, and the cultural foundation of our fisheries. In our Christian stories, we talk about the Musel Michum, the 4 chiefs that stepped up when humans were coming to this land. And the first one, Iitc, the salmon, gave up their life. They said, hey, these humans can eat our bodies and we'll give them medicine. And it'll be something that they can use to nourish them and provide them spiritual health as well. The Scumheast, the bear, stood up, chief of the 4-legged, you can eat our bodies. And the Bitterroot, Spiethlam, and Shayat, the berries, each of them stood up and said, you can take our bodies and feed your people. We just ask that you sing those songs. So I'm thanking Daniel for that salmon song. We sing those songs at our first salmon ceremony to thank them for coming back and feed us. And we have those dinners and those feasts to really to recognize their gift to us. And in return, we have to do all we can to take care of them. Both the stories that were told to us and later scientific studies that look at the diet of our people around Kettle Falls, the 2nd largest salmon fishery on the entire West Coast, provided 60 to 70% of our daily diet. So we really, salmon people, all the way in the interior, we still are salmon people. And it was important to be the scientific holder of those traditional knowledges and what each of those plants meant and what they did for us. So the fishery was a huge part of our ways. And all along the Columbia River, all the different tributaries that feed into the Columbia are named the Wenacchi River, the Methow River, the Chelan, the Entiat. Those are all the Confederated tribes that came to our reservation. And we have a long history of taking care of those stocks and understanding and knowing what they needed. When they put in Grand Coulee Dam in the 1940s on the Columbia River, it's still one of the largest dams in the world, cut us off from our fishery. Every tribe from there, right there at Grand Coulee Dam, all the way up into Canada, into the First Nations, no longer did they have a salmon run. So, it's been a long time for us to work on this issue. We have one area left that we still have, but when you look at the Columbia River Basin, it's about the size of France in terms of, size-wise. All of our salmon stocks are hurting. They're either threatened or endangered, and each year declining. And we see these challenges, and it's so important for us to work hard, trying to advocate both state and federal governments to join us in that fight to take those steps to make sure that those salmon reach those spawning grounds above Grand Coulee, and I'll talk a little bit about that later. But it's very, very important that we continue our struggle. So with our first salmon ceremony that we do each year, with that first spring Chinook that comes up, we're honoring them, and it's, even though salmon don't come physically to that area because of those dams, we're still singing those songs to honor their gift for us. And it's that, these salmon ceremonies go at each of the tributaries all the way into BC. They still hold those salmon ceremonies. And as I'll talk a little bit later, we work really closely with our really close relatives right on the other side of the imposed border of Canada, with the Okanagan Nation and the Tenaka Nation and the Secwepemc. So it's really important, as we work together, we're always staying in touch with our brothers and sisters up and down the river to make sure that we're coordinating, just as we did in the past when we had our salmon fishery, whether it's in the lower river or at this place. The Ilmiquim, the salmon chief of that particular area, would set the regulations when it's time to fish and when it's time to stop. It'd say, no more fishing. These fish that are going through now are feeding our relatives upstream, so we have to stop. And it was an agreement all the way up and down the river, and how we work together to manage and balance with those salmon, to make sure that we didn't take more than we could, than we needed. When we look at what's going on today with our salmon stocks, they're severely impacted by hydropower dams that I mentioned, with Grand Coulee Dam and Chief Joseph Dam, two federal dams that are built on my reservation. And then how they operate those dams on those systems. It's one of the Columbia River is one of the most heavily hydropowered rivers in the world. But we also have a lot of legacy pollution from mines and smelters along those rivers, from the gold rush to smelting ores. And there's a lot of cost associated with trying to clean up those fish. For a lot of our tribes, and those 5 tribes that I work with, they've been without, some of them have been without salmon on their lands for 80 years. And it's way too long for any tribal community or their ecosystems to go without the nutrients that provides that effort. In 2014, we developed a regional approach and worked with our brothers and sisters, First Nations across into BC, and figured out a plan of how to achieve this passage at these dams. And we saw there's 3 different ways that we could address it. One's nationally through the Columbia River Treaty, and we draw a lot upon those United Nations declarations for the rights of Indigenous people. Domestically, the Bonneville Power Administration really pays for a lot of the mitigation that goes on within the Fish and Wildlife Program on the US side. And then within the tribes, we used our own money to initiate studies and conduct work that figure out a way to bring those salmon back. When we started this effort, one of the comments on our Facebook page was, because they supported our work, but they were just bewildered. Why weren't federal agencies working with us? And they said, we can look for water on Mars, but we can't get a salmon over a dam. And that's part of that building the community, throughout the entire region of supporting returning these fish to this area. This is Chief Joseph Dam, and to the left you'll see a scaffold where we fish off of, but it's also a fish ladder that goes into the Chief Joseph hatchery that the Cabo tribes have built. Here's another picture of that hatchery. It produces about 2.9 million Chinook fry into the system each year. And it works really hard to use wild stocks as their base and how they develop those salmon fry. But our phased approach for studying how we get fish above those dams come in three main areas. Trying to study what those fish passage facilities would look like. What does the stocks look like? What kind of health do they have? Looking at habitat availability. Traditionally, we know that given a chance, the salmon will take their shot and go up into there. To the left is a picture of our June hogs that used to come up, the king salmon, and really important to recognize them. But we answered questions around what are the risks to the resident fish, what are diseases, what kind of habitats do we have, and what kind of technologies could help us. And when we completed all these studies, we found that we had 711 miles of habitat still left. We have strong stocks to draw from, and we have quite a bit of production capacity to look at, as well as new technology that might help us. And finally, in our studies, we started releasing salmon above those blocked areas and above those dams, culturally bringing those salmon back up. And it meant so much to us, to the people. And we studied those fish where they went, and all of them swam upstream. And so it was really heartening to know science is proving. We knew that it would, but everything that we know, given the chance, salmon will go up. And I usually end my talks with a different one, but Jeanette Armstrong, who's a Okanagan Nation elder, this statement just stays in my heart all the time. We can get loyal to the future or stay loyal to the legal past. So with that, I say, Lim, thank you very much for your time, and look forward to the other presentations.
John, thank you so much for that presentation. Some very powerful photos and really great information. Well done, very clear. So I thank you for that. I was, just striking just over and over for Indigenous peoples how the effects of, human intervention like these dams just affect our lives so much, and everything that we have to do to combat this mindset, right, of conquering nature all the time. It's just really, really incredible. So I really appreciate that presentation, and we're going to move to our next presenter right now. Next up, we have Carrie Shaganov. She's from the Dene Nation. She's a language teacher at the Yadne school. I don't know if I pronounced that correctly. I apologize if I didn't. She's from Chickaloon Village, Native Village, Alaska. Carrie, when you're ready, please unmute yourself. You have the floor.
Yep. So Willie Jan and Zeto Da. My name is Carrie Shaganov, Suzette D-Land, Talchina Atlan, Huyui da Kada Atlan, Nigeriana Kayak Tinziaden, Testachilatin Isda,
Kuda.
Nigeriana Kayak Ragasna Atna Kanagit Kadak Station. So how's everybody doing? My name is Carrie Shaganov, and I live in Chickaloon, Alaska. I live at the I live at a little creek called Eska Creek, and in our language we call it Testachilactin. I also work for Chickaloon Village, and I am the Atna Dene language teacher for our school. So today I'm going to present and share with you our Yanida'a school, and just kind of go back to how we started our school and why we started our school. I'll go ahead and share the screen. I have some pictures to show you guys. All right, you guys can see this okay? Everything's good? All right, let me show presenter view. Okay, so Yanida'a school is called Ancient Teachings. That's in our language. Yanida'a means ancient teachings. We are located in Alaska, South Central Alaska. We speak the Atna dialect of the Dene language. So this map shows you a little bit about the different languages in Alaska. We have, so there's many Dene languages, of course, but we speak a dialect that's, of course, in peril right now. We don't have many speakers left. And here's a picture of where we live at. We live in South Central Alaska, which we live in a valley. And so we live in between many tributaries that go into the main river, which is called we call it Matanuska River. It's called Fiatona. I'm sorry, I got nervous. Fiatona. And a lot of our salmon come up that river from the Cook Inlet from the Pacific Ocean. So here's some more photos. You guys could see this okay, huh? Everything's good? All right. This is part of where we live. So this is this photo here at the top left is the other side of the mountain range that we live between. We live between the Talkeetna and the Chugach mountain range. Here's a photo of us in the winter time. Of course, we're in the winter. We have 9 months of winter. Our average winter months are probably like, I don't know, 20 degrees and lower sometimes. We do get up down to 40 below at times. So we only have a really short summer months. We have only about 3 months of summer. So when we have our summer months, we do there's a lot of things to do in the summer. And so I'm going to give you a little bit of a history. This photos here are of our grandparents, and our families experienced a lot of trauma, a lot of disruption due to gold mining, coal mining. It brought in the railroad, it brought in alcohol, disease, and it also killed out our salmon runs in Chickaloon. This here is a photo of our fish wheel, one of our fish wheels, and an elder that we visit their fish wheel. But because of those salmon runs that were lost, so back in let's see, the early 1900s, during the World War I, the government was looking for coal, and they came into Chickaloon and mined for coal in our area, and we ended up losing a lot of our traditional food for many years. This slide here explains that because we lost a lot of our salmon and our culture and our language and stuff, some of our relatives from the Copper River area, they felt bad for us. You know, they felt really terrible that we didn't have a way. We have all these rivers and creeks and stuff, but we don't have any fish that come up it. And some of the fish that do come up it, they're either old or they're not the king salmon that we're used to. So we ended up, they felt bad for us and invited us to come to the Copper River area and teach us about our traditional ways of processing fish and how we cook it, how we eat it, how we do everything with fish. So in our language, we call it suk-eh. We call salmon suk-eh. This is, some of these photos are of photos back from 2000, I think the year 2000, when we started having culture camps up in Copper River. And the elders up there would teach us about how to cut fish, how they used to dry fish, how they used to put the fish in the sand to get the slime off. They'd put it in the ground for a day and then cut all day the next day and dry the fish, and taught us how to cook it on the fire, how to cook it and eat it and process it. Here's some more photos. There's Daniel
Oh,
with with Johnny Goodlatow. This is one of our elders that really embraced us and invited us back into their community to learn. So because we're related to them, the elders knew our grandparents. We didn't know them personally. We didn't have that connection with them. But because of our grandparents, they embraced us and invited us in to teach us, because they knew that we were losing it here. And in our community, we live closer to Anchorage, which is the largest city in Alaska. So a lot of our people were going in a different direction and not learning traditional knowledge, was living a different lifestyle, not interested in doing language or culture. And these elders, some of us wanted to learn about these cultures. I'm going to go back to this video here. This is one of our elders. Actually, I'm going to go back to that. I want to talk about Aunt Katie. So Aunt Katie, back in 1992, 93, she started Yani Da'a School because she was watching a lot of our Native people going into jails, and every time they'd get out, they weren't learning, they weren't getting it. You know, the recidivism kept going back into jails and stuff. She realized that she had to connect with our children first. Andrea Carmen, actually, she used to be married to David Harrison, our cousin, and so she was living here in 92, and she actually worked with Aunt Katie to start Yani Da'a School. She really helped her, give her the confidence that we needed in our community to start a school on our own. Yani Da'a School is the first and one of the only today tribally owned and operated school in Alaska. So we don't receive funding, direct funding from the school district, from the state, from the federal government that is just for the school. The tribe fully funds the school. This is the dining. It used to be, so Aunt Katie donated this building here on the left. That used to be her drive-in. She used to have a little drive-in diner, and she donated this building to the school. In 1999, we ended up getting a little bit of funding and built this little red schoolhouse. She wanted a little red schoolhouse, and so she got her little red schoolhouse. Uh, 2010, raised some more money, got a bigger building. To 2021, we got a filter on our photo and actually painted the building again and got our school with an addition on it. And so today we have at least, I think we have 20 kids. We teach preschool through high school. We only have, so Aunt Katie passed away in 2009. And she was our last speaker. She was our last Atna speaker, fluent Atna speaker in our community. Marco Pete, this elder here, came from Taslina, which is probably about 160 miles away, and started teaching us the language and the culture. Helped us with it. He passed away in 2019. Jeannie Maxim from Galcana also lives about 130 miles away. She really helped us with our language and our culture. She used to travel back and forth to Yani Da'a to help us teach, just so we could keep our language going. And she passed away in last year. So we currently have no first language speakers in our community right now. So that makes it more important for us to keep learning and relying on the knowledge that we learned. It really set us, people our age, like myself and Daniel, to step up and to really start teaching what our elders taught us. Some of the cultural activities that we do in our school. So we don't have, since we're not under the federal government or the state government, we could teach what we want to teach. We teach our culture and our language parallel with Western academics. So if we want to go berry picking, if the berries are ripe, we'll go berry picking. If the salmon, so salmon's in the summertime, if the salmon's right, we live by how the nature tells us to. So we teach, this explains about how we teach our language. This is Daniel. He's our drum leader for the school and for our community. We teach a lot of we teach our language in a lot of different ways. Without our elders, we've been relying a lot on recordings and linguistic terms, linguistics. All right, I guess that's it. I must have did the 10 minutes. I'm sorry, I just read the chat. Anyways, yep, so cultural learning is really important to us. And hopefully we'll be able to answer questions. I do have some questions for John. So I think I remember you from our salmon conference here. Did you come to Chickaloon? Yeah.
Yep. Good to see you again.
Awesome. Yeah, good to see you too.
Loved seeing those pictures.
Yeah, Chinan.
Thank you so much, Carrie, for that wonderful presentation. Also beautiful photos and wonderful history, linking at least once again the impacts of human intervention, what it does to people and cultures. But what I liked about the presentation is that you also highlighted, like John, how things can change for the better when communities come together. And I think that's a powerful message of your presentation. So again, thank you so much for that. And yes, we will have time for interaction. Once our speakers have completed their presentations, we'll open it up to questions and answers, and that could be from folks who are tuning in, and you can even ask questions amongst each other. That would be wonderful too. So right now, I'm going to introduce our next speaker, is Elder Frank Iitc. He's the executive director of the affiliated United Tribes of Michigan, and he's a former tribal chairman of the Little Traverse Bay Bands of Odawa Indians. He's calling in from Michigan. Elder Frank, when you're ready, please unmute yourself. You have the floor.
Ani, pipigwao dodem, waganaksing and donchuba, nakwegishik, kondishnakas. I thank you for the opportunity to speak today. And I am going to try to share a screen here with with a few slides. Let me see how good I'm going to do here. Share. And we'll do this. And then, oh yeah, forgot about that. Got one other thing to do here. I've got to make this slideshow run before it goes all the way to the top of the screen because my menu disappears. How do I do that? Anyway, I am going to talk about preserving and protecting tribal fisheries in the Northern Great Lakes. And in this respect, I want to, I've got a slide on the screen right now that is about some people, when we talk about the Great Lakes and many people from around the you know, all over the world, they think of lakes and they think about how big a lake is. And in our case, these lakes are so big you can't see across them, and it's hard for people to comprehend that sometimes when they're not from this particular region. It's like being on the shore of the ocean, and they are, you know, they're treacherous to take any type of craft out on, particularly the canoes and things that we used to use. But this the slide I have up there right now, and I'm going to see if I can figure out how to start my slideshow with without using that menu.
Yeah, Frank, can you hear me?
Yes.
So if you go to where it says slideshow at the top, do you see that?
Well, you know, what I've got to do is when I have the slideshow up, every time I move my cursor to the top of the screen, the Zoom menu is up there and it covers up all the menu items.
Okay.
So I don't know how to get that started. And my apologies for being technologically inept here.
If you actually scroll down to the bottom of your screen, you'll see a little icon that looks like a presenter board. If you move your cursor down where you see notes.
Yeah.
Okay, and then move it to the right another little bit more.
Right about here. Huh?
Right there. There you go.
There we go. Thank you so much for the assistance. This will work great. So here's that picture of the lakes from a satellite. These are, you know, it's a very Michigan being the mitten and also the Upper Peninsula. And that region is important to us, and this is our homeland. And I'm speaking from, there are a lot of tribes in the Great Lakes, and I'm going to be speaking from the Waganaksing Odawa point of view, or the Little Traverse Bay Bands of Odawa Indians. We are right up in the very top of the tip of the Lower Peninsula, and you know, this is what it looks like around here. We have large sand dunes along the edge of the lake, and we have fairly large breakers along the shore usually. And we used to travel by Gmon, by canoe. Unlike those wonderful double pointed canoes, John, that you showed, I love those. Ours have real high points at the end because they're made to cut waves as we go. And in Michigan, while we have all of the, you know, the things that we're doing, I want to talk a little about how we work to protect our fishery. And in doing that, we get back into some of the same, in around the same era that the folks on the West Coast were working on cases. We were fighting a case called US versus Michigan. And in that case, it was Michigan was denying that our treaty rights for fishing still existed. And the United States actually was defended us in this case as the trustee of those treaty rights. The blue area on this map that you can see is the Treaty of Washington, which is that 1836 treaty that is what my tribe and 5 other tribes are signatories to, that are all in this one big area. And in that treaty, there was an interesting clause that we had reserved the rights of the usual rights of occupancy, hunting, fishing, and gathering, until the land was needed for settlement in all areas that weren't reserved, that we didn't reserve in the treaty. And we reserved a number of parcels that were the reservations for our tribes. But outside of those areas, and the federal government didn't recognize those reservations, and also didn't recognize, they for a long time didn't acknowledge the rights we had to fish. But eventually we ended up going to court. That case was filed, was a broad case that covered the whole region on all of the inland and Great Lakes fishing. They split it, or what they call bifurcated the case, and took the Great Lakes portion up. The inland portion sort of sat on idle. The Great Lakes portion, they knew the water would never be needed for settlement, so that's where they took that up first. And a fairly long story that is too long for the 10 minutes we have here to speak. We ended up winning in that case, that our right existed. Then we spent another number of years negotiating on a consent decree on how we were going to exercise those Great Lakes fishing rights. And we ended up, the court looked at it sort of as property. They looked at it, we had a right to approximately 50% of the allowable catch. And then we had to have means of determining what that allowable catch would be and how we would allocate that. So that was a fairly long process. It ended up with a 15-year consent decree, then a 20-year consent decree. And right now we're negotiating in the next consent decree on Great Lakes. In the meantime, we worked on negotiating a consent decree on the inland portion. And the inland portion, we reached that differently. The state stipulated our right existed forever, as long as we agreed that we wouldn't use gill nets in inland lakes and streams and commercialize our inland hunting harvest, which we all had already agreed to. All of the tribes have their own natural resource departments, conservation officers, and tribal courts. And we already had laws in each of the tribes that accomplished that same thing. So we agreed to that, and we reached a settlement. So within all of that, that's the legal background of how we went about using the treaties that our ancestors had negotiated to help to get us to the point where we can fish. But there's something that's different in this. And like I said, I'm speaking from my tribe's point of view here, because as you see, there's other treaties in the Great Lakes. There's other tribes that have differing legal backgrounds. But I always say this, that when we look at these treaties, and we're out looking at the water, my ancestors didn't stand at the edge of the water there and look out there and say, those are our fish. That's our fish. We didn't say that. We reserve the right to fish. And what does that mean? Well, that means we reserve the right to dance for the fish, to sing for the fish, to pray for the fish, to catch and eat the fish, to live with the fish, to have a relationship. And when we said we reserved the right to fish, we were preserving and wanting to protect that relationship we had with fish, not that's our property and we want it. And the courts sort of interpret it as property. And what that means is that if we can't fish, well, they want to give us money. Well, money isn't the relationship. It's the relationship with the fish. And that's what's so important. So to me, the way I understand the treaty rights is that the treaty rights are relationship rights. And that's not just for the fish. It's for the deer. It's for the water. It's for the air. It's for all of the natural world. It's that relationship that we're preserving and how we view everything as relatives. So to me, this is one of the key parts that we have to pay attention to. And as we look at this. So I look at this and thinking, what kind of things are we doing? Well, we have actually the tribes have gone on. You saw the hatcheries from the West Coast. Well, we have hatcheries in the Great Lakes. My tribe runs a hatchery where we're doing, we have lake trout, cisco, walleye, and sturgeon that we raise and help plant in various inland lakes, working in conjunction with inland lake property owners associations. We also work with the state DNR and the federal government in lake trout restoration. And we're trying to do these things that caused, there were a lot of harm was caused. And one of those types of harm that was caused was the loss of a fish called the grayling. And it's Grayling, grayling. And when that fish was lost, it was because all the rivers sealed it up when they started doing logging, and that's killed off the grayling in our area. There are some pockets of grayling fish that are still alive. And what we've tried to do, the tribes and working with other interested parties, have been working to try to restore the grayling to the Michigan waters, to help bring back that relative that's been gone for so long, such as what we hear from these other speakers today have talked about. So this whole idea about this, who we are is sort of new, and how we relate to the world. And if we're successful at doing this in a good way, if we're successful at that, we're going to be able to have coming generations that have healthy relations with themselves and with the natural world and with all of creation. If we fail, they're going to be diminished in that ability to do that. And so when you hear about restoration, we're trying to restore as much of the world as we can. We're trying to protect what's there. And as you can see in this slide, that is such a wonderful world. I walked out my back door and with the lodge in our backyard, and it was a double rainbow and looked like just coming up, and it was orange in the sky. And that was such a wonderful feeling, but it's that feeling of relationship to the world. That's really what this is all about. And we get that when we eat that fish, who's part of their duties are to be there to help feed us and to feed all the other animals. And our job is to help protect them and also to eat them and pray for them and take care of them. And so we all have these responsibilities, and it's important for us to live up to those sacred responsibilities. And I think I'm about a minute over my time, Roberto, so my apologies.
Thank you so much, Aracoel. I say Hachom Aracoel, for that wonderful presentation. Again, beautiful photos, and just takes us to your homeland. And it was wonderful to learn the importance of the treaties and how people came together around those treaties to ensure that you have that relationship. And I think that was a beautiful explanation about the idea of relationship, right? It's not ownership like property, as you indicated, but it's really that relationship, that idea of singing, dancing, and communicating to those relatives in that way. Thank you so much for that once again. And right now we're going to go on to our final speaker, of course, last but not least in the lineup. I have the great honor to welcome Chief Caleen Sisk, who's the chief of the Winnemem Wintu tribe in California. So Chief Caleen, when you're ready, just unmute yourself and you have the floor. Thank you so much for being here.
Hestam Talit. Thank you for the wonderful stories before this and the way of life that we're struggling with. We have much in common with the speakers before us. It's kind of the same story of dams and destruction in no regard for traditional tribal ways or tribal life, and sustenance for the upcoming generations and the knowledge that's needed to continue this way. And, we have that same struggle with the required public school systems or private school systems that go down the same road as academic possibilities of becoming something, when we ourselves have positions that are going unfilled generation after generation. My heart goes out to the Chickaloon, who are losing a lot of their elders that were speakers, those getting to that point is traumatic, and we've been there for a bit. And so we have the struggles. I wanted to start a presentation here to show some slides as well. And I'm going to try to get through that without too much digressing. And it's easy to do because there's so much history, you know, there's so many hurts and harms and things that have gone on in our life that, you know, we just have a difficult time hanging on to these things. Uh-oh, my slides are out of yeah, okay. I guess I'm just gonna talk to the slides then. This is my son. Oh, are we changing? Are we changing it?
Sorry, yeah, I just pulled up your latest version here.
Oh, okay. Are you gonna start that one or?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Let me fix it really quick.
Okay. Well, you know, we all have long histories. And ours here in California are a little bit not as long because we weren't exposed to the incoming new civilization until, you know, the late 1800s or 1850 when they started pouring into the state for gold. And our salmon, this is a Nur, it's Lindara Nur, which is an old time salmon that we call the old time salmons that come up the river. And we too have a creation story that includes how we were spirit beings inside of Mount Shasta, and the creator came and said that we were going to take physical form. And so all of the beings came out of the spring on Mount Shasta and took place in the world that we knew. And salmon went out along with all of the other animals like grizzly bear and fox and wolf and beetle and, you know, all of them. They chose their physical form. And last but not least is that the human finally determined that they would be human. And they went out and they started running down the stream bed. And the creator said, oh, that one's going to need a lot of help. And so he called back the mountain spirit and the fire spirit and the water. And in that discussion that they were having about how they were going to help the human stay on track with what they should be doing, the salmon heard about it and he came back and he said that he would give us the voice. He goes, I'll give the voice to salmon so that they can at least try to communicate, try to understand things. And so since that time, salmon has not spoke. And we take on that view of that we need to talk for salmon. And even though the history has it, I'll go to the next slide. The history has it is that, you know, this is my grandfather, my great grandfather on the McCloud River, and that relationship to the fish existed at that time. Next slide. And we had to adjust to the coming of the white man and his idea of fish hatcheries. And there was a war over the fish until, you know, of course, in California, you could kill Indians and turn in their scalps for money, the bounties. And so this hatchery, these are my relatives on this bank, this waterway, drying fish as part of the agreement to help teach the white man how to take care of the salmon. The next slide. And they used the dip nets to, and trying to show of course, they came in thinking that they knew all about the fish because they learned something about Atlantic salmon before they came here. But Livingstone Stone soon found out that all the fish died after spawning. So next slide. But we had lots and lots of fish. That's why they chose the McCloud River or the Winnemem Waiwakit. That's where they put the first US fish hatchery on the West Coast, came to the McCloud River. Next slide. And then, oh, that's out of, that one's out of order. Oh, no, I guess so. After that, comes 1940, 1928, actually, they start making big plans for the largest dam in California as a keystone water project for the entire state, which means they're going to ship this water to the deserts for GMO farming. Okay, next slide. But we have still these ways of praying and dancing, and we find out through opposing that dam in 2004, we did a war dance on Shasta Dam, and we got a message from New Zealand that they had our salmon, that the hatchery had in fact sent salmon to New Zealand who had no salmon, and that these salmon survived because the waters are much like ours. And in our stories, they told us that the salmon went through an ice waterfall and there they will wait. But we didn't know where they would wait. And then in 2004, we found out that our salmon were in New Zealand. And so we are fighting the Shasta Dam. And of course, it's the same as all, a lot of mining, a lot of things happened before they put the dam there. So there's a lot of mercury being trapped under the lake. And there's a lot of problems. They want to raise it another 20 feet, 20 feet higher. And we're opposing that. And then next slide. This is a salmon that's in New Zealand right now. And we have a deal with the New Zealand Fisheries, as well as the Naitahu Maori people. And the Naitahu are totally supportive. We have a documentary out if you want to check it out. It's called Dancing Salmon Home, and it's by Will Doolittle from Moving Images, and it's 66 minutes. So it's a bit more information about New Zealand and the family that we have there now, who protect the long-finned eel the same way as we do the salmon. Next slide. And then we're praying for them to come back to our waters, and we're trying to figure a way. We're trying to convince the U.S. Fisheries that this is a perfect opportunity for fish biologists to make a name for themselves, to bring back the same species that was here to our river and get a passage around the Shasta Dam so they can swim in and out as they should, as they're supposed to. And right now we're in the process of satisfying the US government about the DNA. And so we have projects to collect DNA of spring run and winter run salmon in New Zealand, and trying to convince them that this is the salmon to bring back, because we have a lot of hatcheries on the Sacramento River, and a lot of the fish have lost the DNA for mountain climbing. And that's what these fish have to do, is they have to climb up 5,000 feet elevation to the spawning grounds. Okay, the next slide. This is the Middle Falls on the McCloud River, and this is in the summer, so there's not enough water coming over. But you can see the pile of rocks on the side. When the winter waters come, all of that side of that waterfall is full of water coming over. That's where the salmon go over that. And if they couldn't get over that, the Winnemem people would dip net them out of this pool and carry them above the falls where they needed to go. So we have these standing relationships that still exist. And I heard that, some people were relearning about their fish and having friends. And we have friends in Hoopa, Yurok, and Karuk, whose rivers run over the other mountain into the ocean, who still help us with our salmon processes. And we keep dancing for our salmon, just like Frank said, even though the salmon aren't there. And so it sounds like, we have this big prayer happening up on the salmon spirit beings, and that maybe people will hear us, and they'll change it. They'll start helping to do this, because we don't have any champions. You know, we don't have any champions working for this because it's all about water. It's all about DNA to the trees and to the environment from ocean to the mountains. And our other relatives, the whales, the killer whales, the otters, the seals, they're all experiencing the loss of salmon. And so, you know, it just makes it so that we just have to work harder. We have to really get some salmon people in there to help us. And so I don't want to take any more time. That's my alarm. So thank you very much. Now I can't turn it off.
Thank you so much, Chief Sis, for that wonderful presentation and beautiful again. All the photos of the homelands are just amazing, and we really thank you all for sharing your stories and the challenges. I mean, once again, you started out with a similar story pattern and talking about the stories of dams and destruction, which has been prevalent, you know, across a number of these presentations, and the whole story about the connection and the salmon in New Zealand was just fascinating. I did put a link for the film in the chat so that people can click on that, and if they want to check that out, please do educate yourself a little more on that story. Wonderful to hear about it, and I look forward to learning more about it myself as soon as I get a chance. So right now, we have some time left. We want to open it up for questions, but I know that Carrie did say that she had a question that she wanted to ask John, and maybe we could start off that way while folks are maybe putting in some questions into the chat area. So if you put a question into the chat, I'll read it to the panelist, and if it's directed towards a particular person, fine. If it's open to all, we'll just mention that. So Carrie, I don't know if you want to begin. I don't want to put you on the spot, but I remember you did
No.
say a question.
Yeah, I was trying to remember all my questions, but I think it's probably for everybody here. So the salmon that you guys are getting out of the hatcheries, and if you've experienced eating the wild salmon, can you taste a difference? What's it taste like?
That's a really good question, and I would have to say that wild salmon do taste better. In our particular hatchery that we developed, we only use wild stock to develop our hatchery fish, but it's a fairly new hatchery that we work really hard to make sure it's up to standard. A lot of the other hatcheries throughout the whole entire region, they're underfunded, they're in disrepair, and you know, they never meet any standards. So our hatcheries are in rough shape.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that too, is that our experience is that, you know, the Sacramento River still comes up, but over the time of the hatchery system, we stopped taking salmon from the Sacramento because of the taste of the salmon, and because they were softer, their meat wasn't as pink. They had eventually our people were catching salmon that had bugs in their gills and they were turning yellow. And so that's why we turn to the Hoopa, Yurok, and Karuk, because they still get the wild salmon coming in straight from the ocean. And our salmon on our river really did change. And then, of course, they started injecting dye into the fish so they'd be pink again. And so it's like one havoc after the next with the salmon, you know, it's like, now they want to do Frankenfish. So yeah, we do a journey, a prayer journey called Run for Salmon. And it's the length of the Sacramento from the Mount Shasta all the way to the ocean to try to raise conscious about salmon and the need for this keystone animal to everything in our system and to pure water, and just kind of wake up, you know, lots of people that need to help out.
Yeah, and the importance of them being able to go on their journey. That's why they taste so good, is because they get to go that length, you know. And yeah, that's so interesting. I'm so moved by all of you guys, and I think it's a really good lesson or learning experience even for us here in Alaska. we have a lot of challenges still. We do still have salmon, but we still have challenges. We've been seeing a lot of changes that come through, and soft meat, and
Yes.
yeah, when we used to travel, I mean, this is just within the last 20 years. So we live like 100 miles from where we go and to get salmon, and by the time it comes back down here from just one day, it's soft. And I remember 20, almost 30 years ago, when we'd travel just from that point to this point, it would be a lot firmer, and it could stay firmer in the cooler without, getting rotten by the time it gets here, or having to go get ice and all that stuff. But it's definitely changing, and there's always they're shutting down different areas too now. Just this year, I think one of the areas down south of here, Kenai, they're shutting down king salmon fishing now, and it's happening.
Thank you very much, Carrie. We did have a question coming in. I know Chief Caleen and John responded in the chat, but the question is, do you think it's okay to buy and eat farm salmon? Is it better to buy wild salmon? And of course, Chief Caleen responds, no, farm salmon is not good for you. And John also responds, do not eat farm salmon, many dangers associated with those operations. So you mentioned about the frankenfish. Do you want to elaborate a little bit more, Chief Sisk?
One of the things that we did bring to the UN was the fact that they were working on the frankenfish from Aqua Bounty, and that the intention was to grow the fish in the United States or hatch it into eyed eggs, then send those eyed eggs to Canada to be grown into fry. And then they would send that fish to Panama to raise into adult salmon, and then come back to the States for marketing. And they are now at the stage of marketing this fish, but they haven't gotten the approval for not labeling it. They're working to not label this as frankenfish or, a GMO fish. They want to set it out there just as salmon. And that is still a struggle. And so, if there's anybody out there who can help, take that out, and I'm hoping that, with the new administration and new people in there, that they will see how detrimental this is to all life and all water systems that use and bring the salmon in. So it is a problem that needs to be on the table again. We need to take it back to the UN, and because as we danced and sang, and the people came in Paris to the Seine River, and they brought the boat. Well, they tried to bring the boats, but they did go out on the water and sing and put those paddles on that water. And the next year, those salmon returned. For 100 years, no salmon had been in that river, the Seine River. And after that gathering that we all sang, the singers on the shore and the ones that were on the boats, and I think that is the message to the salmon that needs to be done too, is that we need to acknowledge, and we need to be more boisterous about bringing our salmon home, bringing this way of life back to reality. Because for California, GMO farming is dying, but nobody wants it to die. But we should be a salmon state. California should be a salmon state. We were once, and then they diverted all the water and all that mining and, all the bad things. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I see Frank wants to also add a comment there.
I just, my comment is pretty simple. Wild caught is always better. And, we need to be thinking about that. If you can't label the salmon as farmed, you can label the wild caught as wild caught. So that's the way you want to look at labels, if you're going to look at labels. And that's the best thing. And the other one is to, we have so many people living in large urban areas that are not going to be able to get the fish themselves or know the person who catches it. But at the very least, you need to go to get wild caught.
Thank you so much, Frank. There is another comment and question coming in, but I also want to thank Chief Sisk for uh, the story about Paris. I was one of those who was out on the water that day and paddling with the rest, and so you brought back a beautiful memory. I know John, we were together also, and Elder Frank. So it's really good to just to see everyone again. But a good relative of ours from the Carib nation of Guyana. Uh, Commends everyone for their excellent presentations, but he says that the word aquaculture wasn't mentioned by anyone. And he says in Guyana, the apirima, the world's largest freshwater fish, is facing extinction due to overfishing and habitat loss. But aquaculture is being introduced to try to save the species. Has aquaculture been successfully tried anywhere to save salmon or any other threatened fish species?
I take a real quick, short stab at that. I know others will say more, but the problem is that the aquaculture, when you do that, you're concentrating a lot of fish in a small area and a lot of diseases come. And even if you're doing it in pens, like in the Great Lakes, we've been fighting this for years. Because if they do that, though the health problems from those farmed fish then get out into the wild stock, and it actually is harmful. So there's other ways to try to revive the species and to protect it other than aquaculture.
Yeah, and our experience here is that the Delta smelt are coming extinct, right? But they're so important to the salmon when they come into the bay, come into that Delta area for the estuary to acclimate to come upriver, because they change from saltwater fish to freshwater fish. And the fish that help them do that are the Delta smelts. There used to be like 9 million smelts in the Delta, and now in the last 2 years, they haven't found any. And so they have taken some of those smelt and put them at the UC Davis Center for Fish Biology or whatever, and they're trying to grow them that way. But the best way to revive the Delta smelt is to let the water go. Let the fresh water come through the Delta and the smelt will come back up. But that's where we fight with GMO farming and all of the draws on water systems. But I don't think that aquaculture replaces a native way for fish and other things to survive. And if we want them to stay the same, like wild salmon, we really can't somebody's bright idea about farming salmon was, maybe for this very same reason in aquaculture. But always the native way is the best for the salmon. It's like, I'm not even interested in bringing back the New Zealand salmon, which are the McLeod River salmon, unless we have a volitional passage past Shasta Dam. Truck and haul doesn't work, and to repeat everything that doesn't work has been going on for millions and millions of dollars. And instead of listening to us, they're preparing again. Just the other day, they created rocks in the river saying, oh, this is a new spawning ground. It's like, no, it's not. It's not until the fish decide it is in the river, because the river are going to move those rocks, because those rocks are not supposed to be right there. And they go on. It's like millions of dollars. I could go on forever, but I'm stopping.
If I could
Yeah, go
add,
ahead.
they both those two make really good points, and the environmental damage that those fish farms do. Frank said they spread disease, but they also eat some of the fry that are going out into the ocean. They're not as nutritious. There's a really good book called Salmon Nation that really kind of documents the history of hatcheries on the Columbia River, and just the ineptness that they used in the beginning. They didn't know what they were doing. And like Chief Sisk said, if they just listen to the tribal people, the indigenous people that know salmon, we can find a way to bring these salmon back, starting with the very essential piece of take what you need. And our society right now, we're not addressing the commercial fisheries that are going on just off the coast. And that's just decimating all of the ecosystem that not just salmon, but our other animals rely upon. So it's, you know, we need to push hard on these folks politically. Like, you gotta put in some regulations to protect the fish, you know. And I'd always say that humans can survive when the ecosystem, which includes salmon, one of our chiefs, is healthy. Once that's healthy, then we can start doing stuff. But it's backwards. We want to do all of our stuff and then add in additions to make things better for salmon. But we got to reverse it. Start from the salmon and then build our societies.
Wonderful points. Wonderful points. There was a comment in the chat about restorative hatcheries and traditional aquaculture from Hawaii, and the comment there ends with the aquacultural systems are open to the ocean and founded on the ecosystems that were once healthy, but those ecosystems are currently compromised, and but they know that they used to work. So again, going back to native knowledge on these things, indigenous knowledge in this respect is really important. We are coming to the end of our time for this session, and it's been a fascinating and really just amazing talk with just incredible culture bearers and knowledge holders. And so we're really so appreciative that all of you can be with us today. Next week, we'll be having our closing webinar for this session, and we'll be focusing on harvesting and using wild plants, and we'll be having speakers from Minnesota, Arizona, California, New Zealand, and the Amazon region in Ecuador. So I hope that you'll all tune back in next week and learn a little bit more about this this facet of our native worldview, right? That collecting and harvesting those traditional plants. This has been an amazing talk as somebody who's comes from people who have a relationship with the oceans and with the waters. It's always just wonderful for me to hear all this as a Taino person. But I'm a person who's also married to a Tlingit woman, so I know all about salmon and salmon life too. So as much as she's been able to share with me anyway, but I really appreciate that. And thank you so much to John Cyrus for being here. Thank you, Carrie Shaganov, for being here. Elder Frank Edwajicek, always a pleasure, and always a pleasure. Chief Caleen Sisk, to see you. And a special thanks to Daniel Harrison, who opened us up in that beautiful, powerful way. And we really hope that you tune back in to our webinar series. Remember that all of these talks are available at the IITC YouTube page. So all the previous talks that we've had, you can go back there at your leisure, check them out, see some of the speakers that we've had previously, or keep checking back in with our IITC website. That way you'll see the upcoming calendar. And we have some other conferences, a corn conference coming up, a bean conference coming up. So you might want to tune into that as well. And finally, let me just thank our interpreters, Rebecca and Jimmy, for providing this and making sure that we try to amplify these messages as much as we can on a weekly basis when we do these sessions. And also to Chris Honani, who always does this behind the scenes coordination of the programs. Thank you so much, Chris. So on behalf of the International Indian Treaty Council, I say Hahom Itunokena da Tia Ono. Thank you so much, relatives, for being here with us. I'm Roberto Mucaro Borrero, and I look forward to seeing you all next week. Thank you to all who are chiming in and who are just really, you could see them in the chat just saying how wonderful the presentations were. And Chris, whenever you're ready, we can close down. Thank you so much.
Shanann.
Hi, everybody.
Man, Welly.